Coming to your actual day-to-day job, how exactly that goes? Like, you watch movies over and over, I mean, continuously? Because
No, there are two aspects to my job. One is as a film critic and the other as the senior deputy editor now. I put together the Sunday magazine for the newspaper, so which means my work involves like commissioning articles, editing the work, corresponding with writers, going back and forth with the writers till I'm satisfied with an article the way it comes out. So that's another aspect of my job. But I don't have, I write from home, and then I do this part of thing
Okay.
in the office, because I prefer a slightly quiet environment when I write. So when you go to office, you typically get inundated with phone calls and things like that. So that kind of
there are a lot of movies that probably, even in the first 10-15 minutes, you know this is not going to work, this movie is full of rubbish. How will you sit through it?
no.
I mean, you have to, because for us, I can get out.
Yeah, see, you have to, but I'll tell you, the converse is equally true. There are a lot of films where they have a very wobbly start, but then something happens, and then the movie becomes something else. You know, so see, I have this philosophy or principle or whatever you want to call it, that any work of art, again, like movies, books, painting, are like people. You know, some people, you meet somebody and you instinctively dislike them because you run into them at a party or something like that, but then they may actually turn out to be a nice person. If you hadn't turned away after 5 minutes, and if you'd actually talked to them for 10 minutes more, you might have found out that they're not as bad as you thought they were. So sometimes you just have to give a bit of time to people to kind of understand what they're all about, where they're coming from. And if you're going to turn away at the first sign of conflict or divergence with the views, or just because their views don't match yours or something like that, then you're really not giving them a chance. The point is to give a chance to, whether it's people or whatever it is, that because some people may be, that you may think that someone is a snob, maybe he's just introverted. You know, how do you have to kind of, you know, get, and that's really what you have to do. You have to kind of get in and try to understand what that other side is all about, even if it's a little difficult for you. And I agree, you have the option of not doing that, you know, because you can just choose to walk away. But I find that it's usually more rewarding if you kind of sit through, and then sometimes there are rewarding times, sometimes there aren't. But that's the luck of the draw.
On top of all this, you know, I've read some of your reviews where you like totally rubbish whatever they have done. Those cases?
Yeah, well, there's no redeeming quality.
That's it?
For me, what else can you do? I mean, like, see, you try to kind of see what
anything good in it.
If there's nothing good in it, what can you really say? And the thing is, I don't believe this thing. You know, there are some people who will say, oh, you know what, there are so much money went into a movie. There's so much effort went into a movie. These guys shot in the Sahara for 25 years and this and that and all that kind of thing. But this is a choice that you make. You know, just because you went through all the trouble, if the thing doesn't, what can you do? I mean, it doesn't work. Nobody asked you to do this. It's a choice that you make. When you go on stage, when you write something, when you write a novel, you may have struggled with a novel for 5 years, 10 years. Maybe you struggled to find a publisher. But when you come out, the reviewers may tear it apart. Nobody will buy the book. Why does this happen? Because your work didn't connect. And you cannot blame the public and say, oh, you know what, I woke up at 3 a.m. and till I went to office, I wrote this, then I went and did my regular job, and then I juggled 5 other things. The writer doesn't care. The reader doesn't care, because for him, I expect a certain thing from a book. And if that doesn't happen, then I'm not going to, what you did behind the scenes doesn't matter to me. That's how it is with films also. So there's really no point in expecting, you know, like they say, you know, if you don't enter the kitchen if you can't handle the heat. So,
okay, how was your experience or the feeling when they called you up for the best film critic? And
they didn't call me up. Actually, a colleague called me and said, hey, by the way, your name is in the list of things. And I just looked and said this, and I was a little numb, but I think I really felt happy for my family, because for till then I was trying to establish myself as a writer, and they were all like, what is really happening, and is this even a profession? Because, you know, journalists, at least something, you know, they kind of have an idea about, but usually people don't really have film critics in the families. So they're like, what are you really going to do? You know, in fact, I remember when I first announced that I had been accepted as a film critic in the Sunday Express, a great aunt of mine, I'm not going to name the actors, but the first thing she asked me, oh, that's wonderful. Is this actor really having an affair with this actress? And I was like, I just like, you know, suddenly it just like one realization happened to me and said, oh my God, this is how people are looking at my profession. This is what people think I do. I mean, like I'm following these, you know, these actors' personal lives and trying to kind of, you know, write gossip columns about them. But yeah, but I think it's validated. See, and the other thing is, we are a kind of society where validation by an external agency or body somehow means a lot to people. You could be doing the same work, but the minute a chapa arrives on you, you're somehow like, even if you continue doing the same thing, you're somehow recognized a little more. Okay. And I think that's something that helped me, because immediately people are like, oh, you know what, he's got this from the President of India, so that's something that kind of thing. So that kind of helped.
That tag helps.
The tag helps, yeah.
And how did this book came up?
The book came about because typically what happens is publishers, when they need to publish a certain number of books, and they're always looking for writers, and one thing that they do is they scan the newspapers to see who's writing about which subject, especially when it comes to non-fiction. So Penguin had been looking at having me to write a book for a very long time. And I kept saying no to various ideas, because writing a book is a huge commitment. It's a commitment of time, it's a commitment of energy, and some books you start and you may feel very enthusiastic about it for 2 weeks or something like that, but then the drudgery of it sets in and you realize that you'll have to keep going till you finish the book. So it's very important to find a book that kind of a subject that interests you, and you hope that will interest you know, kind of interest you till you finish it. And what happened at that point was at that 2010, I think, Ravanan was released, and I think the internet was very harsh about it, the Twitter and the same reactions, and I kind of gave it it's not a bad movie. There are some interesting things that he's tried. The movie doesn't kind of work, but the acting is problematic and all that, but there are some really interesting things happening. So I kind of
supported.
Yeah, it was more like a balanced kind of thing, because that's really, for me, the overall evaluation is sometimes less important than pointing out certain things, that kind of thing, because sometimes it's very difficult to form an overall impression of a thing like the minute you see it, because it's a complex thing, you know. Mm-hmm. So they read the review, and in that review I had written about Mani Ratnam in a slightly historic manner, about how he dealt with things earlier and things like that. So they said, you seem to know his work, why don't you try to write about it? And so it was supposed to be a book of essays, and I had never met Mani Ratnam earlier, and I kind of you know, went to his office, because I realized that at some point it was necessary to let him know that I was going to do a book like this, and in case I needed help from his office in terms of details, or putting me in touch with actors, or you know, stills or things like that, I would need kind of his cooperation. So to research. So or even a good print of a film, because one of the surprising things about India is it's very difficult to get good prints of films that are over like 10 or 15 years old. Okay. You know, they just become very, very bad, corrupt prints, and we don't have easy time accessing good prints, and with subtitles and things like that. So I went to him, and he, for some reason, I think he had been reading what I was writing then, and in the Express, and not just the film articles, but film reviews, but also the articles. And I think he kind of was in a frame of mind then to talk about himself. Okay. So he said, you know, instead of doing this book on essays, you know, you like cinema, I like cinema, why don't we just sit and talk and see what happens? And the book developed out of that, really, because, you know, you can do your book of essays anytime, but when a director is offering to kind of talk then that's a great opportunity. It's a window, and what really helped me was he took a lot of time to decide on what his next film would be. There was one project announced, it was shelved, another project that got shelved, and so there was a really good window of about 2 years where nothing was happening. He was writing and all that, but he was not on production, and so he was available to sit and talk
about it.
So that's how the book developed. Yeah.
And any interesting situations with Mani Ratnam? And how did you understand him as a person?
There were a lot of interesting situations, and I think what I really respected about him is that he respects your time.
Okay.
A lot of times, you go for interviews with film stars, they ask you to come at 10, you'll be waiting till 11 and nothing happens. Or you'll start the interview and they'll get a call and, A.R. Rahman will be on the line and they'll run away and they'll come back after half an hour and then you're kind of this thing. And so the thing is, you're pretty much treated like, it's not just films, even in the business area and things like that. There are lots of times that people rarely value your time as important as their own. And this man does that. And it really surprised me because he'd ask me, let's say we fix an appointment at 11, he'd be in his office at 12:45. And the minute I enter his office, he'd call to his secretary and say no calls. So he literally switch off, that kind of thing, and it'd be his personal attention. And the other thing about him is he is genuinely it's not that he doesn't fight back when you offer a contrarian opinion, but he's genuinely a person who thinks that people can have different opinions.
Views.
That's something that you have to have if you want to kind of talk about yourself. There's a chapter on Roja, which is not one of my favorite films at all. And he was really defending the film about how it is, but he didn't get he was not like, how dare you ask me this question kind of thing. Okay. It was never that. It was more like, I know you asked me this question, but I don't agree with you, and therefore I will tell you why I didn't agree with you, which is always the more mature thing to do, because people are never going to be 100% with you on the same page, and it's never a thing. But that was a very good quality to have, and that again, if you interviewed a lot of filmmakers, you don't typically find this, because they're either very insecure about opening up, or the other thing that happens is, because most of the interviews happens with the vernacular publications, and they're very interested in buttering up the filmmaker or asking them questions that will not show them in a kind of a light, So they're used to always being pampered by journalists, and they're used to calling journalists when they have something to say, and they're used to, using journalists as a tool, as a propaganda tool or a PR tool or something like that. And very few of them are used to journalists coming and probing. Of course, we didn't go into his personal life too much about the work. That also kind of was a very, very, very nice thing to have experienced, because see, he genuinely has ideas. Sometimes his ideas he finds difficult to translate onto the screen, but I don't think he's ever made a movie without having at least an interesting start-off point. And even his failures, they tell you that they're one of the really good responses I've gotten to the book was a lot of film students have come up to me and said, it's really interesting to know how these movies came about, how much thought has gone into these films, and even if we didn't like the film, we know what he was trying to do, what is really, and for them that's been an education, because it's taught them that how to persevere in a work even if they know that something is not going the right way and things like that. So I think that was a very gratifying response that I got.
And usually in Mani Ratnam's movies, the dialogues are like, probably 3 words, 4 words,
right,
or even 1 word at a time. And that's the way I look at it. And even as a person, probably he also is not much talkative. And how did you actually make him to talk?
See, one thing about the dialogues is it came about as a response to the talkativeness of the cinema that was before him.
Okay.
There were people just speaking and speaking and speaking and speaking all the time, and this man said, okay, I've heard enough, let me just try to see if I can put on screen a visual that will communicate as much. Like if I want to show, let's say in Maunaragam, I want to show that this family is not a happy family, I'll dim the lights in the room and I'll show a darkness there, and the darkness is going to project a kind of a gloom or a despair that's not necessary that these people should say I'm in gloom or despair. You can kind of sense it from the frame, and that kind of came about it, though I think he kind of went on with it to a point where people started to parody the dialogues in his films. But I think what really happened was it's necessary to kind of anybody who kind of approaches anybody for an interview. It could be Ratan Tata, it could be anybody. There are two things that you're doing really. One is the job of a journalist, which is to get the facts, and the other is the job of a facilitator. You have to like construct an environment around the person that makes that person trust you and kind of tell you things in a manner that they feel comfortable. You have to build that environment of trust. So obviously there are going to be, because you're not an enemy, they are going to tell you things that they may not have told other people, but not because you're salivating for gossip, but because you're after a level of truth in that person's life, and you have to make them comfortable enough to spill that truth, even if they may not be willing to tell you everything, because it's still, there are things that they may not want revealed. But to the extent that they tell you things, at least the things that they don't say, you know what, I just said this, but now I realize I don't want this, let's treat this as off the record. Now those things are strictly off the record, but there are certain things that they tell you, and your job is to provide that environment. And like you're asking me a question, I tell you, let's say I say this is this, and then you say, no, but okay, so how exactly? So it is up to you to take that and build on it and build on it and build on it until you kind of get a satisfactory answer to that question that you ask. So the thing is to kind of, it's like a servant volley thing, you kind of keep going at it and going at it and going at it till you're kind of happy with your result. So yes, he is a very reticent person. So if you say, let's say, how is it working with Rahman? He'll say, oh, it was great. But that's not what you want. So then you take a film, let's say Tirda Tirda. Well, Tirda Tirda, this happened. How did you go about doing the music? And then he'll tell you, you know what, for the first time, because I'm just sparking an idea, and for the first time, he gave me like this fully finished album rather than just like a demo note or something like that. And then you say, okay, so what was it about the album? How did you listen to it? What was in it? What you did all that. So you're probing into the thing about, so the question that started off with Rahman is great is now you have more substance to that answer of why he thinks Rahman is great. So that's really how it went about. So it's like you kind of get the person to talk more and more and more and build the...
And you made that.
And you stitch the answers together and kind of.
Okay. And is there any other book that you're working on right now?
I'm working on a couple of ideas right now. It's too early to talk, but yeah, but I think my immediate book is going to be an anthology of some of my writings, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Now coming to the Indian cinema, I wanted to ask a couple of best things like best actor, best actress, according to you.
Okay.
Right now. So let's start with best actor.
The
male.
I don't know. I've always had this problem with Indian cinema. I think, or even world cinema. I think there are actors who are very fascinating for about 10 films, but then they kind of, because Indian cinema requires this whole Navarasa concept where you do this entire gamut of expression things in a movie that you kind of, after about 5 or 6 films, you figure out all the tricks. And then what's fresh hasn't. So typically if you ask me, who's the best actor, I tell you somebody whose work is still exciting to me, somebody who's still fresh. And right now it would be somebody like Nawazuddin Siddiqui, who's still a relatively new actor, and the things that he does in his films are still surprising to me. Okay. And that's interesting for me to watch. And he's not gotten repetitive, and he's picking roles that are interesting. And that kind of, so I still have an element of surprise when I see him act. Dhanush is like that for me, relatively of his newer thing, because there is still he's not like a technically polished actor, he's a raw actor. So you cannot really say where he'll go with the performance, and that rawness, that exciting is interesting, because even if it doesn't fall within the realm of what people would call a polished performance, there's a spill of energy on screen that's really exciting to watch when the role meets what he can do with the role, So yeah, that's the kind of actor.
And about directors?
Directors, I mean, I'm very interested in what any director who works within the mainstream does with the mainstream medium. So I'm a big fan of directors like Maniratnam or Selvaraghavan or all these people who, or Balki in Hindi, or people who work within a mainstream medium. And because for me, I think what is really, it is relatively easier, relatively, not easy, it's not easy, but it's relatively easy to say, I'm making a movie for just a very niche crowd, and therefore I can make the movie exactly the way I want to, because you know that crowd is always going to come and accept it. But then this crowd, the mainstream crowd, I have to craft it a certain way in order for them to kind of come and watch the movie. So I need to have songs, I need to have this, I need to have that. And within that, within these must-haves, if I can craft a personal vision, if I can infuse a personality into the film, if I can put something of me into the film and make it a personal film instead of an anonymous film, that's something that's very interesting to me. So I always have a great respect for mainstream craftsmen across the world who work in an idiom that a lot of people follow, but at the same time infuse a lot of themselves into the film.
About music directors?
Again, the same thing.
No,
it's,
name someone.
No, I grew up with Ilayaraja's music, so I'm a big fan of Ilayaraja. Then, you know, I'm a big fan of Rahman. I'm a huge fan of Amit Trivedi. It's like, you follow some people because of what happened was when we were growing up, there were fewer music directors, so I guess we were following careers of music people, of what they were doing. But now we get like bombarded with songs rather than things. So it's become easier to respond to individual songs rather than follow the career tracks or paths of people. So it's all over the place. But I think we're in a place now where it's become difficult to say I like this music director, because again, it's easier to say I like this song. There are so many songs that you like, and sometimes you don't even know who the music director is, but then you find out, you hear the song and you like it, and therefore you make it a point to find out. So yeah.
Okay. I think we have come to the end of the session. Probably we'll take some questions from the audience.
Sure.
Yeah. Monisha, right?
Thank you. I'm thankful to all of you for coming here on a Sunday morning. Usually on a Sunday morning, I don't like to do anything. So this is really, I'm very grateful.
Okay, well, my question is, and it's always been a perpetual question to me. For example, when we have violence and gore shown in movies,
Violence and gore?
and we ask the director, it's clear insane levels of violence. We ask them, they say we borrow it from society, what's happening in society. But then we have people in our society, and they say we saw this in movies and their behavior is influenced by that. So which one do you think exerts a greater influence? Movies on people or people on movies?
I think people on movies. Because let's say, I'll take the example of Taxi Driver. This guy saw Taxi Driver and he was so infatuated with Jodie Foster's performance in this film. He's a psychopath and he attempted to kill, you know, the kind of thing that happens to him. But that was one person. Why didn't everybody, the movie was a global hit, why did nobody else in the world get affected by the movie in that way? Why did nobody else pick a gun? Why did nobody else kind of thing? It happens, right? Because they say that, you know, if a hero smokes in a film, then people kind of think. I think that's a slightly immature thing to say, because, see, if a heroine wears a kind of a style of a dress, let's say, and that dress becomes popular, that's easy to understand because you're kind of looking at it like a style guide or something like that. But if this heroine smokes a cigarette, let's say, is everybody going to take to that? At the same time, are you going to say that there is nobody outside of the movie who smokes a cigarette and therefore it's only because this person smokes? See, I'm saying that studies need to be done to show how much of this affects that and that affects this. And right now, all we're doing is talking about this. We still need to do research about how movies affect people and people
Which
affect movies.
influences what?
Sorry?
Which influences which?
Which influences what? Because this topic comes up a lot of times, and I understand that this is a really important topic, but are people, recently, Ranjana came out, right? Are you trying to tell me that there is nobody like the Dhanush character in a certain kind of segment in India who stalks this girl? Or are you trying to tell me that only because of Dhanush's portrayal in the movie have people seen the film and have taken to stalking girls? There are two different aspects. Either one could be true, but how much, which is the more important thing? So are we never to show? Books do this all the time. Books depict rape, graphic sexual acts, psychopathic villains, serial killers, but you never hear of, I mean, how much of it is influenced by life and how much of it influences life. This is a very huge question, and I don't know if you can provide facile answers for that. I know this is a cop-out what I'm saying. I know you wanted a perfect answer, but this is really a big question, and I wish people would really do something about, sociologically speaking, people would do something about it rather than, you know, I mean, and find out something about it.
Statistics.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the wonderful session.
Thank you.
I just have one question. I believe many of us will have the same. We being in this club, we write speeches, or some of us even write articles, or blogs, or whatever. Now say, for example, I had a bad day today at work. Now it's really difficult for me to go get back and write a speech that day. So I shut my PC off, I take time, I take leisure time, and we write it. But when it comes to your profession, a film is getting released tomorrow, we subsequently see your reviews about the film. So say if you had a good day or a bad day, how do you keep yourself away from that when you write a review?
I think this is where the quality that they call professionalism comes into play. Because it's like, supposing you have something to do, you cannot always let your emotions come in the way of you have to, there is a certain level of distancing that does it. I have found that I have become a much calmer person after I started doing yoga. I've been doing this for the past 6 or 7 years, and you know, at first you think it's such a cliche, oh, yoga improves you, this, that kind of thing. But the thing is, once you start practicing that, the breathing and this and that, you do kind of develop a slightly holistic way of looking at things. You know, you kind of stop sweating about the smaller things. So I think, I know that's not an answer, but I think it's really a question of professionalism. You have to learn to switch off. Let certain things not affect you when you're doing some things, and I think that's really it. And like you say, there are certain things that we can afford to say, okay, I don't feel like doing this today, I'll do this tomorrow. But I could do the same thing. I could watch a movie. I'll say, okay, I don't feel like writing it right now. I'm just going to have a 3-hour nap, or just go to bed for a while, and then I'll wake up a little earlier and then do this. So you do have those slight flexibilities, though probably not as much that you have. But yeah, it's really learning to not sweat the small stuff.
Thank you.
In a different plane altogether. And the book, I'm sure many of us.
I hope.
Sorry?
In a good way, I hope.
In a very good, very good way. And when I bought this book, The Conversations with Mani Ratnam, it was inspiring. And at the same time, I could see there were two intellectual people on a different intellectual plane altogether. You were a very big fan of Mani Ratnam, that was very evident. And he had become a fan of yours through the journey of that book. And that was also very evident. But as a reader, I'm struggling to cope up with your intellect. But at the end of the day, I am coming to where you are. But have you ever thought on it, like, how do I make my writing understandable or reachable to people of, lesser intellectual level? Now, for example, A.R. Rahman did that. He was doing one kind of a music, and today his music is on a different plane altogether. And all of us who have grown up with his music have sort of come to his level. But that transition has been a lot more smoother. But your book is as fascinating as it is. It's in an extremely high quality. So as a writer, do you ever think maybe this writing, I have to make it a lot more friendly?
I